Hey everyone, this is part 2 of building a responsive website from scratch. In this video, we're going to be building the animated hamburger menu and overlay. If you haven't watched part 1 yet and want to see what I built last time, click up here to watch. Otherwise, let's get into it. For making this hamburger menu, the first thing is we need to turn this hamburger into an X when you click on it. So some kind of cool animation. Second thing that happens is this overlay will in some way, shape, or form appear over the rest of the website. And then on top of the overlay will be the actual mobile menu. Then clicking on the X will animate it back into the hamburger. The overlay will disappear and the mobile menu itself will also disappear in some way. So the first thing I'm going to do is, starting with the hamburger menu, animate it from hamburger to X. So to do that, let's do a little bit of research online. So I'm going to go to codepen.io and I will type in hamburger menu and just kind of see what happens, see what we can find here. I do want to mention before we get into this is that even though you can legally copy any code you find on CodePen, I try to do research, see what other people have done in terms of solutions, see what they've built, but then try to build it myself. So this is really just the steps that I take to build something, just to do some research. That's kind of cool. Let me try hamburger animation. That's really the specific thing we're looking for here. I don't want anything too flashy or too fancy. Yeah, that's a little too much for me. And I just wanted to include this part in the video because I do feel like researching is a very important part of coding. You don't always have to invent everything from scratch. Okay, I actually kind of like this animation. The middle bar disappears, it fades out, and the top and bottom bars form the X. So let's just see what they did here. They've added some transitions onto this. And transform origin, line 2 goes to opacity 0, so it fades out. So it looks like line 1, I'm assuming is the top one, rotates 45 degrees, so it's angled. The bottom line is going to rotate negative 45 degrees. And I do like how this looks, so I think I'm going to just try to build this animation. One thing that I think I'm going to do, which is a bit different from the design, is I'm going to make this hamburger menu a little bit taller and more square, because we can see the X is actually square and it looks taller than the hamburger menu. We'll make that change and then we'll start adding in the animation. So what I did here was basically added 3 pixels of margin bottom to the first 2 spans. It's 26 by 14 height right now. I don't know if 26 by 26 is really what I want. We'll just try to eyeball it, honestly. Let's do 5 pixels. This is the header __ menu. This is one benefit of using the BEM styling because I know everything has to be in the header SAS file. There we go. 5. And we'll go back here. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think I'm going to add a class on this header menu so that when it's open, that will sort of turn on the animation. Okay, so header menu. Go back here, so header menu. Then I'll add a helper class. And we'll just say open. So in the header, let's kind of refer back to our markup as well. So this here is the mobile menu. So those spans in the header __ menu. If header __ menu has a class of open as well, then we're going to transform those spans. Span first child. Then we'll add another one for last child. And then I think I need to add one for the middle child. There's no middle child selector, but I think we can do nth child. I think that should be 2, because I think the number for those starts with 1. Okay, so when it has class of open, we're going to do transform, rotate 45 degrees. Then for the last child, we'll do negative 45 degrees. And then the middle child will say opacity 0. And the reason I'm doing opacity instead of like display none is because you can't transition display block to display none. You have to do opacity, which can use a transition. Now, let us test this in the browser. So we're going to reload. And of course, I didn't add any JavaScript or anything yet. So we're just going to add manually the open class to the menu. That doesn't look too good. I think it has to do with the transform origin. Because right now what is happening is they're kind of just rotating themselves wherever their middle is. Let's add a transition, then we can kind of see that a bit more clearly. Transition, we'll say all 300 milliseconds, ease, in, out. Okay, let's try this again. We add a class of open. Take a look at the hamburger menu. Yes, you can see each line is kind of rotating on wherever the center is. The middle one's fine because it's just disappearing. So I actually kind of need to look back at that, because you can see that you want the transform origin to be on the sort of left side. Let's kind of see what they did here. Okay, transform origin, 1em, 1em. I haven't used transform origin really before, so let's Google that. Transform origin. I try to look at Mozilla Developer Network when I can. Okay, transform origin sets the origin for an element's transformations. It's rotating, the origin is the center, and I'm assuming that's default. So let's try top left. Instead of just rotating from the center, it's the corner is kind of where the rotation starts. So that might be what we want for the first line. Let's just try transform origin top, maybe center left, since they're just lines. Let's just add it for all of them. Transform origin center left, or let's do left center. I don't know which one needs to be first. I'm not sure if it matters. Let's add this open thing again. Getting closer. I think I'm actually going to add the JavaScript here, so I don't have to keep manually adding it in. We don't really need the hello world anymore. For clicking on this, I'm actually going to add an ID because I like to use IDs for the JavaScript functionality. So button hamburger. And then take this ID. So in their script.js, we'll say document query selector. And the selector is going to be the hash button hamburger. And then what's the add event listener? And it's going to be a click. Then when you add it, it'll run this function. I always use a little console log just to test first. Open hamburger. Const hamburger equals the button hamburger over here. Actually, let's just call it button hamburger. Then we can reuse this constant that we created. When you click the hamburger, it's going to run this console log message. And then I also want to add a class, and we can do this with class list dot add, and then the class name we want to add. Click hamburger. So I'm going to use a little if statement here. So if button hamburger class list contains, if it has open, the open class, I want to remove it. Otherwise, I want to add the open class. So that should take care of the functionality we need for now. Let's click on this. Look at that! Added the open class and click on it again and it removes it. Okay, so this looks good. Obviously this X looks a bit weird. We just need to kind of adjust the transform origin, I think. Let's try 0 pixels, 0 pixels, just to see what happens. Oh, look at this. Boy, this looks weird. Oh, that looks much better. 3 pixels and 1 pixel. In the header, where was that? Oh, transform origin. There we go. Let's try again. Clicking on the hamburger menu. Nice. Looks like a nice little X. Hey, look at that. Okay, so this is the first functionality of the hamburger menu. The next thing we want to do is we want to load the overlay. Because we don't have any regular content in the website, I'm just going to maybe add some stuff just so you can see the overlay opening over the regular content. We'll just uncomment all of the HTML here. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to load an overlay. So going back to the design, the overlay, it appears under the white navigation bar and then it's just over everything else. So the header's here and then the nav is included in that. So I could do a couple things. I could create an overlay on the same level as the header and then just make sure the header has a higher Z index so it's on top of the overlay. So let's try that actually. So here's the header. I'm just going to add a div class overlay. Okay, so to make the overlay, let's look at the design again. So it starts with this gray color. I'm assuming it's this sort of blue-gray color, which we can use. And then it's a linear gradient which fades as you go down to transparent. First, let's get the color that we need. It's probably this dark blue here. The overlay, let's just add a background color as a fallback. Then linear gradient. Oh wait, background image, linear gradient. And I always forget but let's just try transparent. We'll see. I am a professional web developer, but I do look up a lot of stuff. Okay, so it looks like that's the correct linear gradient thing. So we do need to make this cover everything. And I want to do position absolute. And then we'll just set top to 0 for now, right 0, bottom 0, left 0. Actually, I think I might need to do a fixed because it's sort of going like this. So you need to basically set the height of it to 100 VH. So the viewport height. I think this should accomplish the same thing. We'll see. Ooh, look at that overlay. Oh yeah, so I don't really want that. I think I can use the shorthand. Those 2D, 3, 1, 4D. That's not what I want. CSS gradient, fallback color. Let's try linear gradient. Here we go. There's a way to use CSS gradients and fallback colors. That's what I did. Background color, yada yada. Background image. Oh, fallback image. I don't know if that's actually, because I did that, but then it just had the background color like this. What if I did this? Nope. Well, I guess that... Okay, yes. Weird. I don't know why this is not working. Well, in any case, maybe we'll just get rid of that background color. Weird. I will just delete it. This is kind of what we want. I want to make sure the text goes sort of taller than what we can do, so we'll just do this. Let's just do... There we go. Okay, so you can scroll down. Overlay's fixed, which is pretty good. Obviously now it's covering up the header, so we don't want that. So for here, we need to, I think, declare the position. Set the position, rather. Or I think what we need to do is make the top the height of the nav bar. So this is about 60. We'll just say top is 60 pixels. There we go. So now we have our overlay. We got top to 60. Actually, we should use rems. So we'll do our little dividing game here. 60 divided by 16 is 3.75 rems. Now, we also want to control this with a CSS class. So if you add the open class to the hamburger, it'll open. What I could do is try to just use one CSS class to control all the animations. So I think I'm going to add the open class to the header instead of the button hamburger itself. Open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and then I'm going to add another section here. Hamburger open styles. Move the overlay into the header. And then we'll add our open styles here. And we'll put it in the header itself, of course. I'll just add it at the top. So if the header has class open, then I'm going to say header menu. We need to add these styles here. So what I'm doing is I'm basically moving all the open styles into if the header element has the open class, not the header menu. Let's now test these adjusted styles and update our JavaScript so that we are adding the open class in the header element itself. So create a new constant. We'll just call this header. And we'll use the same document query selector. And we will select the class of header element. So now, instead of checking if the button hamburger has the open class, we're going to change it to checking if the header has the open class. We'll update these to remove the open class from the header, and then here we'll add the open class to the header. So what this is doing now is when you click the button, you're going to check if the header has the open class, and if it doesn't have it, add it, and if it does have it, remove it. Let's test this out in our site. What we hope will happen is when we click this, it'll add the open class. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it works. It's always a good feeling when the code does what you want it to do the first time without having to tweak it. Okay, let's go back into our SCSS, and I'm also going to start animating the overlay, because right now on the site it's just kind of like there. Let's take a look at here. In the header we have the overlay and it's position fixed. So I'm going to create a CSS animation, a keyframe animation, and I'm going to attach it to a helper class. Or actually I'm probably going to attach it to if the header has the open class. Then using that CSS keyframe animation, it's going to fade in or fade out the overlay. We might have to tweak a little bit as we go, but that's kind of the general idea. I think what I'm going to do is by default, I want to make the overlay display none. And then we will fade it in, probably using the opacity and transition, and then fade it out when we close the menu. So I'm going to create a new Sass file actually. So in our app SCSS folder, let's create a new file. I'm going to call this animations. So any keyframe animations we're going to load in this animation Sass file. And then of course we want to actually load it, import it in the main Sass file. So animations, there we go. Actually, let's just put it up under the mixins just to keep things kind of organized. So these are like the functional Sass styles, and then starting here is where we have elements and the different component styles. Keyframe animations, you start by typing @keyframes, and then you write a name for what the animation is. So what I want to do is I'm going to create maybe 2 animations for the overlay, and I'm just going to call them fade in and fade out. So the first one's going to be fade in, and with keyframes, you start with a from, and then you end with a to, and then you put the initial styles in the from bracket and then the end styles in the to bracket. And you can also add percentage of progress in here. So if I wanted to, I could say, let's say 50% do something. Let's indent this a little bit. Or any percent you want, and then it'll use that to time when certain animations take place. This is more if you have like complex animations. What we're doing is a pretty simple fade in, so I think I might be able to get away with just using from and to. Okay, so in the header Sass file, the overlay has a default display of none. And then in the animations, I'm just going to add display none just because that's where we're starting. And then I want to end up having a display block and opacity of 1. And we're also going to start with an opacity of 0. Now the tricky thing about this is you can transition opacity from 0 to 1. It'll have a nice smooth animation from 0 to 1, but you can't transition display none to display block. That's just not how CSS works. First it's going to be display none, then I'm going to say maybe 1%. So right after it starts, it's going to be display block, but it's going to be opacity still of 0. And then from 1% to basically 100% at the end, it will stay at display block, but then it's going to transition from 0 to 1. We can try this out by adding this animation in our styles. Maybe I'll just add the overlay styles up here. So if the header is open, then the overlay is going to have animation, and it actually gives you a little help here. So name, duration, timing function, direction, things like that. The name is the name that we added here, so fade-in. Duration, let's just say 300 milliseconds. That's kind of my default. Timing function, ease in out is what I usually use. Then delay, I don't think I need a delay. Iteration count, you know, how many times you want this to happen. We just want it to happen once, so I think you don't need to add anything there. And then direction, we want forwards. And then fill mode, I don't think I need that. So forwards, this is actually important because saying forwards will ensure that once the animation is complete, it will stay at whatever styles that you've put on the 2. Otherwise it'll kind of animate and then reset back to whatever you had styled before adding any animation. So we want to keep this display block opacity 1 after it's finished. All right, these are the styles we need for the overlay, and let's, I guess, test it out. Okay, so here we can see the header, and then we can see the overlay now is display none. Let's click on this and see what happens. Okay, looks like Hamburger's still working, but the overlay is not animating in. So we know that the animation is being added to the overlay, but for some reason the loading isn't actually working, and we're not sure why. What happens if I uncheck the display none? Oh, so it did actually fade in, look at that. But for some reason, it's not sticking. The end state is not staying on the thing. Display none, but it does have the animation. Okay, time to Google again, or I guess DuckDuckGo. CSS animation final state, maybe? Okay, maintaining the final state at the end of a CSS3 thing. And then I like looking at CSS tricks as well as MDN. So Stack Overflow, CSS tricks, and MDN are kind of my main 3 sources that I go to. Okay, looks like this person's also opacity, changing from opacity 0 to 1. Elements go back to opacity 0. Animation fill mode is forwards. Well, I did use that, I believe. Yeah, forwards. Maybe, does the order matter in terms of what properties I put in here? I'm not really sure. I mean, it seems like it's working if I uncheck the display none. So I'm not sure what is happening. Yeah, it just says forwards, should make sure it'll hold the last keyframe state. Don't forget to specify 100%. Huh. Wonder if that does anything. I don't know if that's gonna work, but let's check on MDN. I don't know if you need both 100% and the 2. This is just from and to. Yeah, from 75% to... I don't think I need to actually say 100%. I mean, I guess it can't hurt. Let's just try. I'm not even sure if this is, like, good syntax. Okay, let's try again. Nope, not working. So I don't think it's this. I'm going to delete the 100% stuff. I know this is bad, but I'm going to add an important to this. See if that does anything. Nope. Jeez, this is kind of annoying. Fade in, 300 milliseconds, ease in, out, forwards. It seems like I'm doing everything right, but obviously it's not working. Let's just get rid of this important because that didn't help. I'm going to try commenting out the display none just for now. And I'm going to try just setting it to opacity 0 and see if that makes it do anything different. Okay, so it did fade it in. So somehow adding a display block is not getting added. Because unfortunately I do need the overlay to like be display none, otherwise I'm not going to be able to click things that are under the overlay. So let's put that back in. Oh, what if I... Okay, by default it's overlay display none, but what if I add display block when it's open? Oh my gosh, did this work? Whoa, that's so weird. What if CSS animations don't actually affect the display property at all? That could definitely be the case. Let's look at this. CSS animation display block. Because it might just maybe not affect the display property at all. Animate from display block to display none. That's sort of what I'm looking for. As you know... Oh, one of the properties that cannot be animated is the display property. Okay, so that's why. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Although, intuitively, you would think that you could add an animation from display none to display block and it would sort of understand that you want to fade it in. So I think I don't need to add any display properties in the animation since obviously nothing's happening. And because I'm not doing that, I think I don't even need the 1% thing because I had just done that to make it display block and opacity 0. So let's try this again. Okay, here's the overlay. Header doesn't have open class. Let's click on it. Ooh, yeah. Okay, so that's a fade in animation. And then let's make another one that's going to do the opposite, fade out. Fade out from opacity 1 to opacity 0. Okay, I added the fade in animation when the open class is added. I don't know if it'll work if I add the fade out animation for like the default. Let's just try it. We might need to add a helper class to the actual overlay to fade it in and fade it out. But let's just reload because I want to make sure nothing weird happens with this. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that because I added a fade out animation by default to the overlay, I didn't want it to like fade out when you load the page because that would obviously look very strange. Okay, clicking on the hamburger menu, fades it in, very good. And it just sort of disappears. So it doesn't have the transition, which means the animation is not being added. So let's make this a little bit more reusable. So what I'm going to do is I'll just add a little helper class, fade in, and then we'll take this, and instead of applying it specifically to the overlay, I'm going to add it to this helper class here. So we can do the same thing with the fade out. We'll add a little helper class. I think this might be a better practice anyway, because then I can fade in or fade out any element using these helper classes. So just fade out. I do need to leave a display block here just to flip it from display none to display block. But what I think I need to do is in JavaScript add that fade in and fade out class to the overlay. So if header, if it contains open, remove open. So this is when you close the hamburger menu, just so I don't get things mixed up. Close hamburger menu, else add the open class, meaning open hamburger menu. So when you open the hamburger menu, we want to add the fade in class to the overlay. So let's add a new constant here. Let's call this overlay. Document query selector, and it's just class of overlay. So when you open the hamburger menu, overlay, class list, add fade in. Let's just test the fade in functionality now. Going back to our site. Okay, so you can see the fade in class was added, and it's adding this animation. And then we'll do the sort of the opposite. We'll say overlay classless add fade out when you close it. And we might need to also remove the, I think I have to remove the fade in class. And then I guess we should also remove the fade out class when we're opening it, just to kind of reset everything. Okay, try it again. Reload for good measure. All right, it's fading in. Now what we want to happen is we want the classes to basically swap when we close the menu. So it's fading in, but it's not. Oh, you know what's happening? It's because this, when you remove the open class from the header, it immediately just like goes back to display none. Shoot, it's kind of annoying, but I think I need to remove the overlay, getting the display block, and instead adding it to the overlay element itself so it doesn't get affected if the header has the open class or not. So overlay, if it has class fade in, this is just going to do the same thing of just making it disappear. Oh boy, this is tough. Okay, fades in, still doesn't fade out. Okay, let's think about this. What's happening step by step? So, okay, going back to 0, this is the default state. You click on this, it will add display block, and then it also fade it in. The animation works because going from display none to display block, it's still opacity 0, so it's not going to like show up without the nice transition, the animated transition. But then if you remove that, then it's going to just display none right away. So what we want to do is make it go from display block to display none after it fades out from opacity 1 to opacity 0. So let's just research some other possible solutions. CSS animation, display, well, it's kind of what I was searching for before, display none, display block none. Let's see what Stack Overflow has for us. Okay, yep, changing display none, Okay, CSS or jQuery, i.e. JavaScript, can't animate between display none and display block. Opacity 0, visibility hidden. Interesting. I just want to make sure that the stuff is still clickable when we have like a visibility hidden, but it still exists. Get rid of this display none, get rid of opacity 0. So now it is default display block. Visibility hidden. That's interesting. Oh, it seems like it's actually still clickable. Oh shoot, this might be the silver bullet I'm looking for. Yeah, so it's still clickable, which is awesome. To see what happens is, if it's just opacity 0, it's not clickable. Like I can't select text as easily. Yeah, I can't select the text, but if it's visibility hidden, it does select the text. And I think visibility should be able to be animated. So let's go back here. So fade in, we're gonna go from visibility hidden to, this might be where we need to just switch it quickly to visibility, visible with opacity 0. So we're kind of combining. So it's sort of like display block, but I guess it can be animated for whatever reason. Then we'll do the same thing here. So from opacity 1, visibility visible, we'll go to opacity 0, and then we want it to be visibility hidden. But in order to make it still visibility visible, but opacity 0, we're going to add 99%. So when the animation's almost done, it's going to be at visibility visible, but opacity 0. And then let's see if I need to adjust any of these styles here. I guess I don't need this anymore, opacity, or display none. I think this should work. Famous last words. Let's reload for good measure. Okay, see what happens. Fades in, all right. Oh my gosh, it fades out. Yes. It always feels so good when you're like struggling with something and you're researching it and then finally get it to work. That's an interesting little lesson, I guess. Like display none is different from visibility hidden versus opacity 0. And they all sort of do different things. Okay, yay. Let's go back to the mobile view here. Oh, I'm so happy. Oh, this is great. Okay, so now that we have our nice fade in animation of the overlay, next step is to actually code the menu. And that's it for the animated hamburger menu and overlay. If this video helped you at all, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching and keep on coding.